Hello. So, welcome to another episode of the Strong, Healthy, and Glowing podcast. I'm Sarah, and today I've got with me Carley Weissert. And you'll have to excuse me if I'm not pronouncing that correctly. But Carley is a women's empowerment and confidence coach, and she's based out of Pittsburgh in Pennsylvania in the US. And she does a lot of work virtually, which is why I thought it'd be so great to have her on the podcast as well. And she helps women to really regain their confidence and their power, which I absolutely love. So, Carley, would you like to tell us a bit about yourself and what you do?
I'd love to. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here. And you nailed the pronunciation, so good job. So yeah, like I said, I am a women's confidence and empowerment coach. So I just really what had me become a coach and have this desire was to help me 2, 3, 4, 5 years ago, who was such a people pleaser, was really just, I was so disconnected from who I really was. I had created this person and had lots of layers and masks and things, and was meeting everyone else's expectations, was checking everyone else's boxes. And eventually one day I woke up and it didn't feel right. I had this whisper kind of building, and eventually she got loud enough that I finally listened and started down the path of transformational work, especially in like the world of the feminine. And now I share all of that with the women that I work with. I help them break out of people pleasing patterns and regain confidence in who they are and really get reconnected to the truth of who they are. I like to refer to myself as like the flashlight shining the light on the path that you're walking that you may not be able to see at all. And I have that flashlight there with you to help you just be one step at a time, because the next step is always the right step as long as you're listening to yourself. So that's that in a nutshell.
Oh, that's so good, because so many of us have those people-pleasing patterns and we do everything for everyone else and then don't allow ourselves the time to actually look after ourselves and our own health. And, I see that all the time with the training and the skincare and that kind of thing that I do, and that holistic health side of things. You see it all the time, people looking after everyone else but themselves, and then they end up getting sick and that kind of thing, and then finally realizing I need to look after myself and get out of some of those patterns. So It's so good. So I'm going to kick off today with, what does strong, healthy, and glowing mean to you?
I love this question. The first thing that comes to mind when I think strong, healthy, glowing is honestly, the first word that comes to mind is alignment. Like when you are in alignment with your true self, you are strong, healthy, and glowing. And that can look different for everyone. And I know that alignment sometimes is like a coachy, jargony way of speaking. So really it's being true to who you are, like your really true, authentic self, in regardless of the fears that there may be present, to really let that version of you out, or the judgments, like the people pleasing, the things, the stuff that keeps us small and in a box, to break free of that and really live as your true authentic self, to let your light really shine. Like that is being strong, healthy, and glowing in a nutshell to me.
That's so good. Yeah, that piece is often, I think, overrated, like that internal glow. A lot of people think, skincare, makeup, that kind of thing. But it's so true. If you're feeling pressured and feeling stressed and feeling like you don't have time for yourself, it's going to be really hard for that glow to come out and for you to express that strength and, vitality, I guess you'd call it. So I wanted to go back and delve into that people-pleasing side of things. I think a lot of us women sometimes struggle to recognize that and what it's doing to us. So if someone's sitting here going, I wonder I wonder if that's me, or, I'm always feeling low energy and that kind of thing. How do we sort of start to recognize those patterns of people pleasing?
Such a good question. I mean, for me, some really like big red flags or red flags. It's like if your life feels like it's filled with obligations, if everything that you're doing is out of obligation, how I should do, what I should do, all of this, like that's a really good indicator that people pleasing patterns are kind of running the show. And it's so prevalent for women with this cultural conditioning of being a good girl and a good woman, and like women like that we're meant to be polite and kind and nice and do all of these things. And if we pause and tune in to feel like, well, actually, like I'm not a yes to this. I don't want to join the PTA and like run that with my kids. And I don't want to like sign up and volunteer for this or do like, we often feel so much guilt. So we just say yes anyway, right? So that's another, like, if you really struggle to say no, and if you do say no, you are racked with guilt, that's often a indicator of people pleasing patterns. Let me see if there's anything else that wants to come through. Oh, resentment. Resentment is another one. If you find yourself resentful because you're always taking care of other people and rescuing others from their own problems and things like that, like you feel this again obligation to do for others before you do for yourself, that's a good indicator. And this is not to say that if you're not people pleasing, then you're just totally like not, you have no regard for anyone else and their needs or desires or anything like that. Like there is a beautiful balanced middle ground, and it may take time if you are over here in the people pleasing camp to kind of find that balance, because the pendulum will swing, and sometimes we go into the extreme of just like, well, I don't care about anybody but me. That doesn't really work either. But like if there's just lots of guilt, resentments, obligation, and like really if another really common thing that I see, especially with women, is relating to self-care or doing anything for yourself as selfish and bad and like should not, like is the very last thing on the list. I'm sure you see it too. Yeah, it's like that is a big indicator that like you are probably, your people pleasing patterns are running the show.
And what would be so obviously once we start to recognize that might be going on, what would be the sort of steps, I guess, or the first steps to start moving away from that and start to look after ourselves?
Yeah, I mean, the first, it's simple stuff, right? But it's not necessarily easy because we're so programmed to not be this way. But a lot of it really is, it comes back to boundaries, and not necessarily in this like really harsh, like putting up walls, isolating from other people kind of boundaries, like, but just really tuning in to yourself and to your body, which is another, I see a lot of women who are, and I see this because I was this, like I living in their heads, right? Like everything is a mind logical decision. And while that's beautiful, your mind is such an important tool. Your body is really where your truth lies, and your wisdom are so disconnected from our bodies. So I'm kind of combining things right now. I get so passionate about all this, but creating boundaries comes from tuning into what you need, how to take care of you, what's true for you. And that often goes back to tuning into your body and like just recognizing even simple things of like, what does a no feel like in your body? What does a yes feel like in your body? And something that is simple in concept is very foreign to many, to people in general, and especially women. Like that's who we're talking to right now, right? So like slowing down, tuning in to your body and what she is trying to tell you. And often, like, that language may be, again, a little like, wait, what is she talking about? Like, listening to my body. But it's just like those gut feelings, or like when you're like your heart starts to race, or your body feels tight, or like you've got like this knot in your stomach or a lump in your throat. Like, we can recognize the signs our body gives us. It's then honoring those and listening to them, and not squashing them down because our mind, our conditioning is telling us, well, no, I should say yes because that's what I'm supposed to do. That's what a good girl will do. So really beginning to create boundaries for yourself, slowing down and tuning into your body. And honestly, like, having support, having other women in your corner, whether it's a coach or just like really close friends, to help support you through this, because it is not easy. Like, when you stop people pleasing, people are not pleased. And so you feel like such a bad guy. Like you feel awful and you think you're doing something wrong. It can feel like you're actually like really harming someone, when in reality, you're just taking care of yourself. And that's when that support really comes into play.
That's so good, because I see that all the time. Like, the number of people who come to me, and we're training or something like that, doing exercise or a yoga class, the number of people who are just disconnected to what's going on in their body, and you can see they're thinking about what they're meant to be doing and where their body's meant to be, and you can see there's this massive disconnect because their leg is off to the side, for instance, and you sit there and go, straighten up your leg, and they're like, my leg is straight, and you're like, no, it's out here. And that's obviously exaggerating, but you can see it. Their foot is like off at a 45-degree angle, and they're like, oh yeah, my ankle and my foot is straight. It's like, no. And there's a complete disconnect. And I think that is, so relevant to what you're saying about listening to what our body says. I think because it drives, and it's a bit of a chicken and egg theory, admittedly, but it drives from that whole, like, society's telling me I should do this, or, doing this, that, or the other is good for me. But I'm getting a knot in my stomach and I hate doing it. So I'm going to just disconnect that. Mm-hmm. And it's so prevalent, and it's exactly the same sort of thing. So I think it's very, very similar. It's that whole disconnection between what our body's telling us and what we feel we should be doing, or whatever it is. And, we get so in our head that it's a completely different thing. What's happening down here in our body, in our gut, and up here. It's like, it's crazy. Like, and it's so, all of a sudden they start to get into that pattern and start to tune in, and then they go, oh, my knee doesn't hurt anymore. My knee doesn't hurt when I'm doing lunges. Oh, my ankle's feeling better. I can walk further. And, that's what I see with training and yoga and that kind of thing. It's like, oh, my knee doesn't hurt. I can walk longer. And I think it's the same thing, because all of a sudden their body's just going, yes, this is what I need. Mm-hmm. I love this. I love this. And I think so often it's driven, as you were saying, it's driven from that almost guilt perspective of, this is what I should do. This is what society is telling me I should do. So let's dig into that side of things a little bit as well. What are some tips that you could offer us, or suggestions you would make to help move towards overcoming that guilt and that should element?
Yeah, that's a good one. That's it's a lifelong journey, I think, because I've been doing this kind of work and really diving into all of this for years. I mean, I've been in the world of self-development in some way, shape, or form for like 10 years, and really diving into this more, the feminine, getting connected to your body, like all of that, for the past two or three. And it's still a skill that I'm working on, a muscle I'm strengthening. And I think again, the first thing that's coming up for me, one of the best things you can do is to have someone in your corner, or like be in some kind of container with a coach or a good friend, like someone who is willing to be honest with you, right? Because we need those in our lives. That's the honesty is the kindest thing you can give anyone. And to assure you of like, no, what you're allowed to say no. You're allowed to take care of yourself. You're allowed to set boundaries. Like, because sometimes we really just need that outside perspective because we can't, it's in our blind spots. We just can't see it. It feels, and it's going against all of our conditioning, right? Like it just feels so opposite to what we've been taught. So we need that assurance. And I think another really great practice is to like often when, at least for me, my experience has been if I am setting boundaries and just like really actively trying to break those people pleasing patterns. That's a tongue twister. I've got so we all have our internal monologue, right? My inner critic, my self-talk, like she'll start to chirp and give me all these reasons why like I shouldn't be doing what I'm doing, and like this is rude and you should take care of this person and they would do it for you, and like all of the things. And noticing that, I mean, that's honestly the first step. It's just noticing what is going on in my internal dialogue and again in my body when I'm setting these boundaries and trying to take these steps. So noticing is the first step, and that sometimes like living in that space of just awareness and noticing is that's where you need to be. You might need to live in that space for a really long time, and that's okay. And once we get a grasp on the noticing and really like turn up the awareness, then we can start to shift talk. So noticing like these negative voices that may come in, and just it could be as simple as saying like, thank you. And that's not true. Like, please sit down. Like, I envision these voices for me, like on a bus, like we're all like me and all of like the versions of myself, parts of myself are on a bus. And sometimes like my people pleaser or my little girl or like parts that are part of me are welcome here. They grab the steering wheel and they drive the bus. And while I want to integrate these parts, there are certain parts that I don't want running the show. So when I notice that like they're grabbing the wheel, aka like talking really loudly, I'll thank them and just ask them to go sit back to the back of the bus. Like I visualize it in my head. That has been a practice that's been really helpful for me. And again, like it's practice. It's not something that you like, oh, I know what to do and now I'm going to do it once and then I'm never going to have an issue again. Like if only it were that easy. But yeah, so really putting attention on your self-talk can really be very beneficial as well. And it's just a lot of grace because it takes time. There's no magic button, there's no switch to flip. Like it just takes time and practice and grace and a willingness to get messy. You're very likely as you start to unravel patterns, you're gonna make mistakes. You're gonna say things the wrong way. You're gonna do all of these things. Instead of beating yourself up for it, thinking back into the people-pleasing patterns, that's what's comfortable. That's what we need to be willing to be messy, have grace and compassion for yourself. So those are probably the things that I would suggest.
Oh goodness, yeah, that's a whole nother snippet, that being willing to be messy and being willing to not be liked per se. So such a big thing.
Yeah,
so
it
good.
really is.
So we go back to, I know you've mentioned boundaries and that kind of thing a couple of times. So how do you go about, and also not being liked? So are you able to offer us or the listeners any tips on how to set those boundaries and how to say no without offending people? And I mean, not being liked and not having people, think you're the greatest thing since sliced bread, is one thing, but to be able to do that without offending people and without them getting really pissed off. I mean, it's one thing for them to not be your greatest fan anymore, but any tips on setting those boundaries in a polite but firm manner?
Yeah. I mean, I think the most important thing to note, I think, is that when you start to set boundaries, to speak your truth, to really let your authentic self out, like, you likely there will be people in your life that, are upset or don't like this new version of you, or like don't like the boundaries you set. And that's okay. It is really difficult to be with sometimes, of like upsetting others. That's why we people please, right? Like, because it's easier. But it's easier to have everyone out there happy and deal with my own upset and resentment and guilt, because I can just stuff that down all day long. But like, to deal with people upset is why we people please, or to not deal with people upset. So I think to just know that it's so normal. It's part of the process of setting boundaries. So to allow space for it, and to trust that we're all big kids, right? Like, that you are a sovereign being, and so are they, and they can take care of themselves. And so can you. So when you set a boundary, it's not your job necessarily to be taking care of their emotions and things like that, even though you will very likely feel that like compulsion to be like, oh, but it's okay, and I'm really sorry, and don't worry about that, and like to kind of retract your words. And then as far as like actually setting them in a like kind and loving way, it takes practice. That's where that willingness to like let yourself get messy and maybe like not say things the best way, and then just being committed to cleaning things up. But often boundaries do some boundaries need to be communicated verbally? Yes, of course. Like, you need to have conversations with people, but a lot of the time it doesn't need to be spoken. It can be over here with you, and all in your actions, your behaviors, and what you allow into your space, whether that's physical, energetically, emotional, whatever the case may be. But because boundaries, this is something that, at least this was my experience when I first really started like diving into boundaries. It's not over there with other people. It all comes back to you every single time. Your boundaries rest on you. It's not about other people. It's not, you can't talk to me that way. Like, that's not a boundary. That's a wall. That's not a boundary. A boundary, like a version of that would be a boundary, is, again, if you're verbally communicating it, like, I'm not available to be spoken to that way. And while that's great to communicate, it's also more, I think, powerful and effective if, again, using this example of someone speaking to you the way you don't want them to, removing yourself from the conversation, excusing yourself, like, that's the boundary. And the boundary gets crossed if you sit there and allow them to continue to speak to you in a way that doesn't feel good. That's just one example. But yeah, so I think that in terms of setting them, like, it's not so much like a magic script or certain words or things to use like that, outside of like, setting a boundary starts with I. Like, I am not, or I am not you. Once you're out there finger pointing and blaming, it's not a boundary anymore. But it's really just often silent, and something that you create and uphold for yourself, because it's not up to other people to uphold our boundaries. It's up to us. And that's why they can be so tricky.
And I so love this. It gets me thinking to what often ends up happening at this time of year. So we're leading into, I mean, at the moment we're recording this, it's start of December, and it's leading into that busy festive season for a lot of people. And, so often that can lead to a lot of, family issues and things like that coming out. And I think, for women, sometimes we're expected, well, here in Australia and where I am, you know, a lot of times there's pressure, and I hear this all the time from my clients who are mums, as, you know, I'm needing to do all these things, you know, Christmas for the kids and that kind of thing. And so I think it's so key that communicating things to, you know, communicating those boundaries and, you know, knowing where they are for yourself so that you're not overstepping them and you're looking after yourself at this time of year. So do you have any tips for if you feel you need to communicate those boundaries to other people, if, you know, if walking away from something is, you know, because admittedly walking away is good, but it may not always be an option. So what are some tips for communicating where your boundaries are?
Yeah. Again, I would just really come back to like the I, like it's over here with you. And they're like boundaries, creating them and upholding them require a lot of like personal responsibility too, which can be, it gets sticky sometimes. And it's like, sometimes it's just easier to just not be responsible and put it all out there on other people. And while that may feel good in the moment or work temporarily, in the long run, it really doesn't serve. So just to using I statements is really again, it's so simple. And sometimes, especially if we're triggered, it can be really challenging to look inward and look at like, okay, what do I need? What's happening over here with me? Instead of you're doing this and you made me upset and like pointing the finger outwardly. So another tip, if you know, especially like you said, heading into the holidays and being around family or things like situations where you know there are boundaries that you want to uphold for yourself, for your own well-being, to have those conversations prior to the event or the dinner, the party, or whatever the case may be, if it is with someone, like communicating with them. Because if the desire is to verbally communicate a boundary, you wait until you're triggered and or the other person is triggered, it's very likely not going to be a productive conversation. It's really hard for us when we're in adults to have calm, neutral conversations. So having the conversations and voicing your boundaries prior to, like, you know, I'm not available to talk about politics at like Christmas this year. And I really hope that you can respect that. And the tricky part too is honoring their response. Like they may not, if you set a boundary, like if you're setting it with a particular person, they may not be agreeable to it. So to be attached to them, automatically honoring it is also like it has some roots in wanting to control. So really honoring their feelings around it. Like, okay, I'm not available to talk about politics at this year. Oh, well, I like, that's too bad. I really want to, or like, whatever. They respond in a way that is not receptive. Like the next step for you is to really like honor their feelings. I really hear that upsets you, and this is a conversation you want to have, and I'm not available for it. And then that's where it would come to the, you know, if you communicated ahead of time and they're not respecting it, then removing yourself from the situation, whatever the case may be. And it can be tricky. It's not, unfortunately, it is not necessarily this like black and white, easy, like, oh, I bound this is A, now you have to like do what I say, because that goes back and control and expectation of others. Like we can try until we're blue in the face, but we cannot control other people. We can only control ourselves. So
Definitely that, you know, only being able to control ourselves is so key. So speaking of controlling ourselves and that kind of thing, if we find we do need to, say, remove ourselves from a situation or make a tough call, and this is not just over the holiday season, but it can apply to any time of the year. If we do find we need to make a tough call, I know you specialize in helping people find their confidence as well. So how do we find, or do you have any suggestions for finding that confidence to remove ourselves from the situation, or the confidence to have that tough conversation, or to make that tough call?
I think it really comes back to like being willing to honor yourself and your truth, and to not people pleasing often. When we are in patterns of that, we are abandoning ourselves, we are betraying ourselves for the sake of other people and their happiness, their comfort, their, to take care of them. And so it's such a, it's not complicated, isn't quite the word, but it's layered. There are a lot of pieces. It's not this magic pill that you swallow and you're just confident one day and you trust yourself and what, you have this deep inner knowing about all of it. It takes time. So I think to just really to be devoted to yourself and committed to yourself is really the first step to really, because it's obvious for most of us that we are so capable of being caring and loving and doing things for people. And it requires you to take all of that you give outwardly and turn it inward and give it to yourself. And that's not to, we're so abundant in our love and what we can give. So it's not this pie where we were giving it all away, now we're taking it all back. It's this infinite thing. So you can give to yourself as the love that you give to others. So it's not a quick fix, or there isn't an affirmation that's going to just get you there if you say it in the mirror every day, right? Again, I wish, and those help. I'm not diminishing affirmations. I love a good affirmation. It really just requires a willingness to really be devoted to yourself. And it takes time and patience and just, yeah, a lot of grace and compassion for yourself. I know I'm using a lot of the same words throughout this conversation. It's so true. It takes time. It took me so much time to really get the courage to start to live a life that was really for me, not for others. Because through doing that, through living a life for myself and letting my brightest, shiniest, most authentic self come through, I am better able to show up for the people in my lives and mission for other people to do the same thing for themselves. So it's not this selfish thing. It's actually really for the highest good of everyone. And sometimes it takes time to really see that and have that land in your body.
So good. I love this. This is absolutely brilliant. And I think this is what, empowerment and confidence is all about. Just being able to, honor yourself and, know what you're about, I guess. Yeah. So is there anything else? I know I've asked quite a few questions today, but is there anything else that you'd like to share that I haven't asked you about?
I want to share that it can be really scary to get to a point in your life where you're like, you know what? I'm done with this this people pleasing, with this good girl conditioning, with doing for everyone else first. Like, I'm done with that. I want to put myself first. And I'm not even sure who she is or what she wants or what she needs. Like, it can be really scary. And I just want to say that I see you. If you're in that spot, I've been there. I have been on that path where I know, okay, I'm headed in the right direction. This feels good. And I don't know where I'm going. I don't know what it looks like. I've never done this before. This is terrifying. Like, it's not for the faint of heart, which is why it's so easy to stay in those patterns, because it's comfortable. It's what we know. It's a conditioning. And I just, as scary as it can be, as much courage as it takes, it is so worth it to walk through this like mucky, messy, dark middle, because the magic that's on the other side, and the freedom, the lightness, the sparkle that can be on the other side of it all is so worth it. It's worth the muck and the trudging through and the moments of doubt and what am I doing and how did I get here? Because I had all of that. And yeah, I just don't let fear stop you from being who you truly are. It's not worth it. It's not worth it.
That is so, so good. And I know that's going to resonate with so many people, the fact that, honoring the fact that it might be a little bit difficult, or might be very difficult to step out of that shadow, I guess, of the people pleasing and that kind of thing. So given I think that is going to resonate with so many people, where can people find you and how can they maybe work with you?
Yeah, so I have got my website. It's up and live. It's still being like perfected, but we're not waiting for perfect before we put it out in the world. But it's just my name, carleyweissert.com is my website. I'm pretty active on Instagram. My handle is my name at Carley Weissert. And I'm a coach, so I've got some one-on-one spots available beginning in January 2024, and I've got a group program that launches in January as well, which I'm super excited about. It's called More Please, for women who want more out of their health, wealth, and relationships. So really diving into actually a lot of what we talked about today will be kind of taught and coached on inside of that program. But yeah, so social media and then some one-on-one coaching in the group program if you want some more of me.
Beautiful. So I'll link all of those in the show notes. Is there anything else you'd like to add about your group program or one-on-ones?
No, I don't think so. If you're unsure about if either of them are a good fit for you, I have discovery calls where we can kind of get connected for 30 minutes and see if we're a good fit. You can ask questions. My one-on-one coaching is 6-month containers because, like I spoke to throughout this episode, like the change takes time. Transformation takes time. This is not, if we could all flip a switch, then no one would need a coach anyway. So it is a 6-month container. And More Please is a 3-month group program. So it's January through March. But if there are any questions, I am more than happy to hop on a call. You can slide into my DMs, however you want to get in touch with me.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Carley. I'll link your website and Instagram in the show notes. And I'm guessing sign up and booking for those discovery calls and that kind of thing, or sign up for the programs and coaching and discovery calls. That's all on your website, is it?
It's on my website. It's linked in my Instagram bio. So there's links everywhere.
Perfect. Fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Carley. Thank you for spending the time. I think this is going to be so important for so many of us leading into this crazy time of the year for what is crazy for a lot of us. So thank you so much for joining me this morning. I'd really encourage you, if any of this resonated with you, please do jump on over, follow those links in the show notes and jump on over, check out Carley's website or Instagram, depending on what your social media or website of choice is, or platform of choice, should I call it? And dive in, see if it might be right for you. Thank you so much for joining me today, Carley. If anyone has any comments or questions, we'd love to answer them. Please feel free to reach out to either Carley or myself. And I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you, Carley.
Thank you so much. This was so much fun. Thank you for having me. Such a pleasure.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful rest of your day.
You.